for this month. Isn't it wonderful? So they only put those letters there. I could have put who knows what, it's an alphabet soup. But I was concerned about this stuff before COVID and education, Christian education. My point here is the case for Christian education and the case for saving your children's souls. I have a box here, a banker's box, which is full. Don't take these with you. These were given to us at Noah's Ark Children's Center when we were still open, which we closed last September. And these were suggested to be, these are from the city of Hamilton, or ASCY, as Affiliated Services for Children and Youth, which is sort of the official daycare liaison with the city. So it's your tax dollars at work. So, the Princess Boy, what Riley wore. There's a whole pile. You can take a look at these. Don't take them home with you. I'm saving them for evidence. I am Jazz. Okay. And by the way, I hear Jazz now is a teenager. He's had surgery and he has a lot of health problems. Well, yeah. So basically, he's a victim. But this is not a new problem, and I hope today we're going to change gears. We're not going to be talking about COVID, although they're not unrelated. But I want to just read you a kind of a long quote, and this is something I want you to really pay close attention to this, okay? And then we'll get into the whole thing. The whole development of modern society has tended mightily toward the limitation of the realm of freedom for the individual man. The tendency is most clearly seen in socialism. A socialistic government would mean the reduction to a minimum of the sphere of individual choice. Labor and recreation under a socialistic government would be both prescribed and individual liberty would be gone. But the same tendency exhibits itself today, even in those communities where the name of socialism is most abhorred or turned down. Once the majority has determined that a certain regime is beneficial, that regime without further hesitation is forced ruthlessly upon the individual man. It never seems to occur to modern governments that although welfare is good, forced welfare may be bad. In other words, practical utilitarianism is carried out to its logical conclusions. In the interest of physical well-being, the great principles of liberty are being thrown ruthlessly to the winds. The object of education, that's why my main talk is about education, it's all connected to freedom. And the COVID situation just simply emboldened those who want to control every thought. What they were doing before COVID is now like crazy on steroids, right? That's why we have the rainbows going on now. The object of education, it is now assumed, is a production of the greatest happiness for the greatest number. But the greatest happiness for the greatest number, it is assumed further, can be defined only by the will of the majority. Strange projects in education, therefore, as I said, must be avoided, and the choice of schools must be taken away from the individual parent and placed in the hands of the state, the government. The government then exercises its authority through the instruments that are ready at hand, and at once, therefore, the child is placed under the control of psychological experts themselves without the slightest acquaintance with the higher realms of human life, who proceed to prevent any such acquaintance by being gained by those who come under their care. Such a result is being slightly delayed in North America by the remnants of Anglo-Saxon individualism, but the signs of the times are all contrary to the maintenance of this halfway position. Liberty is certainly held by a very precarious tenure when once its underlying principles have been lost. For a time it looked as though this philosophy, which came into vogue in the middle of the 19th century, 1800s, would be a purely scholastic matter without influence upon daily life. But such acquaintances have proved to be deceptive. The dominant tendency, even in a country like North America, Canada, the U.S., which formerly prided itself on its freedom from bureaucratic regulation of the details of life, toward a drab philosophy in which all higher aspirations are to be lost. When one considers what the public schools of Canada in many places already are, their materialism, the discouragement of any sustained intellectual effort, the encouragement of the dangerous pseudoscientific fads of experimental psychology, one can only be appalled by the thought of a commonwealth in which there is no escape from such a soul-killing system. But the principle of such laws and their ultimate tendency are far worse than the immediate results. A public school system in itself, indeed, is of enormous benefit to the race, but is of benefit only if it is kept healthy at every moment by the absolutely free possibility of the competition of private schools. A public school system that means the providing a free education of those who desire it is noteworthy and beneficent achievement in modern times. But once it becomes a monopoly, it is the most perfect instrument of tyranny which has yet been devised. Freedom of thought in the Middle Ages was combated by the Inquisition, but the modern method is far more effective. Place the lives of children in their formative years, despite the conviction of their parents, under the intimate control of experts appointed by the state, force them to attend the schools where the higher aspirations of humanity are crushed out, and where their mind is filled with the materialism of the day, and it is difficult to see how the remnants of liberty and freedom can subsist. Such a tyranny, supported as it is by a perverse technique used as the instrument of destroying human souls, is certainly far more dangerous than the crude tyrannies of the past, which, despite their weapons of fire and sword, permitted at least thought to be free. That was written 100 years ago by J. Gresham Machen. He was rewarded for his talk by being defrocked from the Presbyterian Church in the U.S., lost his teaching position at Princeton. 100 years ago. And he goes on to take on states like Nebraska. Sherry was raised in Nebraska. And Nebraska is about as Saskatchewan as the U.S. gets. I mean, it's really, really very conservative. But it speaks about the laws in Nebraska, where you would not be allowed to think beyond what they've already told you can think. They've made it illegal to learn a second language in the 1920s. And when we were first married, I remember a church-run school in the 70s was raided by police officers because they were an unregistered school. And that's Nebraska. You know, just think about Illinois or New York or California, what it would be like there. So I want to look at public education. The reason I said that 100 years ago, this is what they were talking about. This is what a Christian man was talking about. Because it's probably been, at least in the U.S., 200 years since education was explicitly Christian. Around 200 years ago, they decided through Horace Mann, one of the philosophers of education, it's not the same in Canada, but we've caught up here, the idea that church should not have anything to do with education. God should not be in education. And I'm going to talk I'm going to make a few points here. That's probably the longest one thing I'm going to say. Maybe not, I might be lying to you. Let's see, where's that? I tend to lie about my length. Okay. So, excuse me, that paper doesn't work there. Okay. First page, second page, sorry. This is not a sermon, this is a speech. I want to make one point right away, is that we've been at this a very long time. But what does the Bible say about educating our children? What does the Bible say? You should know this. Deuteronomy 6:4-9. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Education, and not just Sunday school lessons, where they're very important, or Bible lessons. Education is the parent's responsibility. I'm not saying we should not have schools. But we must start to think differently about schools as subcontractors. You might not be teaching calculus to your child, but you can find a tutor. Remember that education, as we know it today, everybody went to school. How many of you had the Lord's Prayer in school when you were a kid? Yep. How many of you had things like that going on? See, education was already not Christian at that time. You had teachers who believed that was important, and they allowed it. But the educational foundation was that God has no place here. So they allow the Lord's Prayer until they don't anymore. They allow Bible stories until they don't anymore. But the idea was that the foundation of education is man, not God. And that was from philosophy of Dewey. Dewey's, saw an article in the Toronto Star. They called Dewey is education's Darwin. And they did not say that in a way that was a put down. That was a good thing to them in the Star. So first of all, you as family members the parents are the first educators. I don't know if this slide goes with us or not. Okay, we'll just keep that up here. This is not what I'm talking about right now, but the family are the first educators. This is a group called Parents as First Educators, PAFE. Have you heard of that group? Yeah. Parents as First Educators. Yeah, good group. They put out a lot of things. The Bible affirms that the family educates, protects, and provides health care. I mean, obviously you're not doctors, but we're responsible. When the government says that something like health care or housing, watch this, or food are human rights, it means somebody doesn't understand civics, because human rights, if it's a human right, that means the government's obligated to do this. And they have to do this. Healthcare, it's a human right. Well, that means the government gets to define what healthcare is. What happens when that becomes food? Who's going to define? If the government must provide it, then it's a great thing. Food is a fantastic thing. Obviously, you can see that in my body. But the idea that it's a human right, it's a human right to have equal access to work, equal access economically, and fair balances and things like that. But to say that education is a human right is to say the government's responsible for that, and then they will define what education is. That's how those are called positive rights. Negative rights means you can't stop me from talking. You can't stop me from traveling. You can't stop me from protecting myself. That's negative rights, which you think, is that bad? No, negative rights are very good. Positive rights are an obligation to somebody. And so we say healthcare is free. Well, yeah, do you pay your taxes? Do the medical people, do they work for free? No, obviously not. And see that idea that what's defined as healthcare now. We've all had stories of trying to get help from healthcare, and it's not allowed because, it's been delisted or it's not considered important. So we see that we family can enlist tutors and schools. Now, when Macon said this 100 years ago, something else had already been happening 100 years before that. And what was happening in the world, in Europe? What was happening big time? It's affected every one of us. Everybody was, before about 200 years ago, everybody worked at home. You were very likely to be a farmer or a carpenter or a shoemaker. And the young men in your house learned to be what your father was. Your young women in the house learned to be what the mother was. Factories come, the Industrial Revolution, right? And so what happens? Dad is out of the house, and he punches a time card. They needed millions of people to feed the factories. Millions of people to feed the factories. So what do? You go in the factory, you go in, and the whistle blows, and you go into the plant and work on the floor. What do they do in school? They ring the bell, and you go to school, and you go to class. And they ring the bell again, you go out for lunch. You ring the bell again. And there's a conditioning thing, which worked very well at that time. Now, we are no longer in a factory era. We obviously can work from home. I mean, you're not going to run the steel mill from home. There's a few factories that are still kind of important. But how many people actually work in factories today? So why do we have factory schools that still work that way? You're all going to do this project. Some of my homeschool grandkids are just amazing what they've been able to pull off because they were told what to do at a specific time. So the first thing I just want to say is it's the family's responsibility, and not just religious education. It's on us. Okay. The second thing, though, is that there's government interference. Now, why is Pride Month? Why do we have June? Pride Month is Father's Day is the same time, and that's no accident. They could have attacked. They could have attacked us at Christmas, or even in the spring around the resurrection. They attacked creation, because one of the first things, the first human created was Adam, who was a father, and it's attacked on fatherhood. It's attacked on the family. So it's going right for the very heart. And I wanted to say this, and before I forget to say it, on the slide, there's not enough time to change the schools. Now, I got a little project here. I hope we can harass the schools as much as we can this month. Have you called a school today? Yeah. Tomorrow's a PA day. Maybe tomorrow you can call, but we need a list. Call a school board and just say, I disapprove. Everybody here needs to call every school as much as you can. You got nothing to do, put your feet up, just make phone calls. And you might want to make your phone so it doesn't show your name. And I can't tell you how to do that because every phone is different, but there's ways to block your number. And I think you called someone, they hung up on you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. See, they hung up on a taxpayer who pays their salaries. Just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. See, they're taking your money. They are taking your money to turn your children and your grandchildren against your values. And just remember, like in all of human history, industrial education, as we have now, is only about 200 years old. How did people learn before that? Well, they did. They learned, that's how. And I wonder how many brilliant people have been just numbed to death in our school system. So for the second big thing is I want to look at the government's interference. But the second thing I wanted to say, though, before there's second, third, fourth, whole bunch of stuff. Last line there, by the time the schools are changed, the children attending will themselves be grandparents. We can make everything rainbow go away tomorrow, and we will not have changed the schools at the core. The foundation is faulty. So I want to do all the things we can. I'd like to see public education dismantled completely and rebuilt somehow. But we can do that as much as you want, and as you do that, remember, we're going to do something, but your grandkids who are in school now will be themselves grandparents if everything went really well. But we have such a small number of people who are getting this message, who are taking their kids out of school. I mean, I was going to save this little part for later, but just imagine there's a guy in your neighborhood across the alley. We have a lot of weirdos in our neighborhood. It's NDP downtown neighborhood. So a lot of weirdos in our neighborhood. And you got your kids going down the street, and there's this guy who says, "Hey, come here, I want to talk to you." And he wants to show your kids porno books. And he wants to talk to your kids about their sexual preferences and things like that. What would you do? We say, no, stay away from him. But give the guy a teaching certificate and a union card and a job at Ridgemont, and now he's a kid's gym teacher. Is there something weird about that? And it's us that's weird. If we just say that doesn't really, no, it's just because they got a certificate. We know the difference, don't we, between certification and qualification? So here's what we're going to look at. I'm part of a signal group, and there's some people who are really wanting to get things done. And one woman on the group was saying, we really want schools to be neutral again. And I think that's horrible. We're not asking for neutrality in schools. And neutrality is a myth. Jesus said, if you're not gathering with me, you're scattering. I don't want a school that says, we're not going to talk about God at all. Well, that's how we got in this mess. We're going to have absolutely no firm foundation on anything. We need to realize that in schools today, the theology, the ideology is anti-creation, it's anti-law, it's anti-redemption. And there is nobody on the planet who does not have a form of a worldview, a way of looking at the world. Everybody has one. Worldview, learn that word and use it a lot. because there's no academic subject that can be approached without assuming there's a God. You can't do math without God, although we pretend we can. But when people say, we're going to do math and here's the answers, that's because the universe was created to be rational, to make sense. Empiricism works. You can look, you can measure, you can do these things. That is why that works. So you take God away, what we're doing when we're doing math is just being irrational and arbitrary. That's the worldview of the schools. That's why what is now the right thing to do was the wrong thing to do 5 years ago or 2 years ago. And what's the right thing to do now will be the wrong thing to do a few years down the road. If you ever want to be on the right side of history, you'll never get there. So neutrality tells Christians that they are to stay out of education. We can run Sunday schools, but our values have no place in the public schools. And just do this. Call a school, got a pride flag. Hi, we'd like to provide your school with a Christian flag. You know, you've seen the Christian flag is white with blue. And if they say, well, no, you can't do that, why not? Because it's not inclusive. Oh, no, it's certainly inclusive. This is inclusive of anything you're putting up. What do you mean? It's not. It's intolerant. It's what? No, we can't take sides. No, you've already taken a side. See, when somebody says God doesn't belong in school, they're being religious. Humanism is religious all the way down. And people say, no, I'm an atheist and not religious. No, you're completely. See, if you say anything about God, you're doing religious theology. You're making religious statements, okay? That is where we got to attack this. So I say attack it by starving the schools of children and taking the children away. So religion doesn't belong in the classroom. Now here's a quote from a writer for, I think she's with the Washington Post now, but this is actually came back a while ago. She says, Christians can rant and rave against humanism and feminism and any other ism on Sunday. Come Monday, the children belong to the school. According to this line of reasoning, Christians should refrain from expressing their religious convictions in a public school classroom, and by extension, any cultural, political setting where ideas are debated and legislation could be the result. On Sunday, children get religious instruction that should go no further than the four walls of the church and has no greater purpose than personal piety. On Monday through Friday, when children are isolated in the government school system classroom, we are to believe that children receive a value-free, neutral education devoid of the opinions of teachers, textbooks, publishers, and the educational establishment. Now that was written in 1986 by someone who was still playing with that game as that word neutral. Now today, they don't want it going on in the four walls of the church either, right? You're an intolerant, and Trudeau's starting to take aim at churches who are not inclusive. So there's no neutrality in anything. A person, you say, well, what's your agenda? Well, you can always ask that question. You have an agenda. You have an agenda when you put up the pride flag. Let's stop pretending that that's not the case. And so I want to say steps towards a solution. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is the number of imperfections. Actually, is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Maybe 7. Who knows? I might get another one in there before. Okay. What I want you, and they all begin with R. I usually try to avoid alliteration always, but I don't know why I did that. Okay, first of all, remember that compulsory public education is a recent development. Things have not always been this way. PEI, the first compulsory public school, was 1852. Other provinces in 1873, Newfoundland in 1942. Always the progressives.
That's before they were Canadian.
That's before yes. And public education result, as I said, of the Industrial Revolution. Just as factory work is now mostly over, so is the need for factory schools. Your child, we've heard about the war on boys, right? I remember public education, what it was like to be a boy, and how many boys are jacked up on Ritalin because they can't stand to be in a classroom. And the girls always act perfect, almost always, and the boys, they're bouncing off the wall. So what do we need? Well, we need to keep them in. I had classmates that were held back in school because they were left-handed. I'm that old. Yep. Right? What? How in the world? And how? Anyway, so first was remember that this is not the way things always have been. Second thing, realize what has been done to the family. Because of high taxation, which pays for these fiascos, we often see that 2 incomes are required, right? For survival. The money that should be available for one parent to stay in the home now belongs to the government for education and health care, belongs to the government to undermine the home, right? We have easy divorce. We have a marriage situation where people was always have in the back of their mind, I can always get divorced. Basically, I'm looking at our boomer generation. We were really crappy parents. I'm sorry, we messed things up pretty good. An unrealistic expectation of material life. This is what has been happening to our family. Realize what's been done to the family. What do people expect? In that they're going to get married and they're going to have the 2 cars and they're going to have the boat and they're going to have all these things. That's diminishing because that's completely not happening now. Now, well, I'd like to have a place to live that's not under a bridge, but you understand, so much has been destroyed in what we would consider normal families. If you know your ancestors, if you knew them at all, you know what kind of lives our grandparents lived. And I remember my grandfather stopped playing violin when he got frostbite because he hopped a train which literally went through his yard. I think it's kind of a cool story. The train went through his yard, and he hopped on the train to save, what would it cost for a trolley in the 1930s? 5 cents, maybe? He held on, and he took the train clear across town in the wintertime and got frostbite because he was that frugal. Where did his wife work? Nowhere except home. She raised the kids. And then we think, well, how did they get by? Well, they weren't texting very much. But unrealistic expectation of material life. And then we Christians, all the societal pressures have not been exempt on Christians, honestly. Christians have suffered, and I mean suffered and been influenced by many of these same effects of society. So remember, realize, and thirdly is repent of our dependency on the government. Look at it and say, well, what's going to happen? Even if it was back as far back as Ronald Reagan, the worst words you ever want to hear. I'm for the government and I'm here to help you. Obviously, I'm not going to fix the pothole in front of my house. I'm not going to call my neighbor to help me put the fire out unless I think he's capable of it. We have reasons. The government is there. God made government for a purpose. But God did not make government to run your life down to the color of your shoelaces. And that's really where we're at now. Why doesn't the government do something? We now have a poverty industry where people making 6 figures are doling out tax collected money to people who are poor and doling out money to organizations. And it's a whole industry, a whole top-heavy industry that includes child care, health care, and benevolence. We have that, it's just it needs to completely collapse. And we might just get a front row seat on that. So repent of our dependency on government. Who's going to feed you? You are. Who's going to take care of you? You are. And that's where you build families that will look after the elderly. The government's got that all sewn up, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. How are they going to pay thousands of dollars to keep you in a home when it costs about $3? Now I know after the government's done with it, it'll cost $300 for the pill to get rid of you, because they have to have the kickbacks. See, that's what happens when Christ is out of the culture. Christ is not just out of the schools, Christ is out of the culture. And so all that means is that man's in charge. Return, number 4, which is a lot like repent, to biblical values. Get your grandchildren to church. Get your children to church, to Bible teaching. And get them to a church where they're teaching the Bible. Youth group is not church. I know a lot of people drop their kids off and I had a great time. We had a Big Mac eating contest. We played basketball. We all threw up and we had a little devotional or something. usually I was a youth minister too. I understand, but most youth ministers aren't really qualified to do with your kids what needs done. You know who's supposed to really do that? It's you. When I was a youth minister, I was getting up there. I was like 30. I hated youth ministry. I don't like kids. But the best ministry I had was near the end when I started teaching people to teach and started trying to get, put some things in the hands of parents. Because the idea was in the 70s and 80s was, well, you got to have a youth minister because youth minister is going to look after the kids. So when did that happen? That's a post-war thing, and I mean World War II, where we suddenly had to have all the kids looked after. Do you know of a United Church in the city of Hamilton practically has a massive education wing? You notice it was all built after World War II because they had all the soldiers coming home, they were having babies, and they educated them right out of the church. They youth grouped them right out of the church. You know what's the easiest thing to buy in Hamilton today is the empty United Church building, or Presbyterian Church, or Anglican Church. Big facilities. But the parents and the children were separated. So don't do that. And if your church is doing that, say, we need to do something different about that. Take control of your children. They're your children. So I know this is going to be really hard because if a parent would say, well, we're going to start homeschooling, and the kid would say, I will kill you if you make me homeschool now. Or I will report you to Children's Aid, or I will do whatever. It's going to be a long process, and it's going to be a struggle for some people. Now, I'm going to speak though to you as I think most of you are probably more grandparent material, right? Just guessing. Okay, I got 15 of them, and 4 others that call me Papa too. So. And I'm thankful that they're all homeschooled. I want us to rethink, and I don't know your situations, but if you're retired, homeschool your grandkids. You are no less qualified than anybody who's teaching over the bricks and mortar school. You are completely qualified. Believe me, you are qualified. You are probably overqualified. Remember, qualification does not mean certification. You don't have the papers. I mean, I honestly, when we had our child care center, I've interviewed staff who could barely read and write, and they were right out of Mohawk College. So it's getting bad. The best one is I don't know who she was, sweet woman. We're going to plant a garden with the kids. It's okay. Well, let's plant some beans. Okay, she gets a can of beans.
Oh, no.
It's like I have to go back and yell at her grandmother for that. Honestly, that is. And so you say, well, no, but she had the papers to look after up to 8 kids at a time. Yeah, my grandkids didn't give me gray hair. This project did. But if you are a grandparent and you're retired, come out of retirement and teach your grandkids. Or come out of retirement, get a job, and support your daughters, usually be the daughters, so they can stay home and homeschool the kids. Do something. Because this is the kids' souls here. Every day the kids go to school, they're going to a place where they want to tear them away from Christ. That's the goal. The goal of education is to make them good citizens, and the definition of a good citizen is one who is completely tolerant, open-minded, can't critically think. And after we've seen the COVID nonsense, it's pretty obvious they were successful. I mean, I remember seeing so many young people with a mask on. Why? Because they were told, oh, gee. I used to do things like my parents would tell me, well, they jump off the bridge. Would you jump off the bridge? Well, actually we have, but yeah. So return to these biblical values. So remember, realize, repent, return, and reject the vocabulary of humanism. Reject the vocabulary of humanism. Have you ever heard of R.C. Sproul? You go to this church, you have? Okay. The solution to the crisis was formulated by the concept of a neutral education. A neutral education is one that is neither pro-religion nor anti-religion. is neither pro-God nor anti-God. It seeks to keep God out of educational issues. The only problem with the solution is that the ideal is impossible. There's no such thing as a neutral education. Every education, every curriculum has a viewpoint. That viewpoint either considers God in it or it does not. To teach children about life and the world in which they live without reference to God is to make a statement about God. It screams a statement. The message is either that there is no God or that God is irrelevant. Either way, the message is the same. There is no God. An irrelevant God is the same as no God at all. If God is, then he must be relevant to his entire creation. That's R.C. Sproul. The point I was making is reject the vocabulary of humanism. Do not let anyone you're talking to say, we're just neutral. And just tell them, that is bunk. In French, it's la bunk. It's in German, it's balderdash. Okay? It is complete phooey. That you have no agenda? Absolutely not. So stop it. Okay. And then lastly, let's see, A, B, C, D. Okay. All right. There's 7. Okay. Reconstruct a biblical society. That means you're going to go into whatever job you have. You have a landscaper here. We have, I think, an accountant here, a researcher. There you are, and rust proofers and chemists and all sorts of people. Everything you do to the glory of God as a Christian. Everything you do. So you train your kids in your work if they can do that work or they do something else. Everything you do is for the glory of God. It's not just like I need this job. Look at your whole life as a reconstruction of a biblical society. Because, see, the society we have now cannot sustain. What we have now, there's a baseball player, Yogi Berra, said, if it can't go on forever, it won't. Okay? God says you can't go on forever before judgment comes. So we're not going to, you're going to pick up the phone someday to call an ambulance, and, next week we have an ambulance. Our healthcare system's falling apart. When our second grandson was born, my daughter met a woman at the hospital at Mac. Her child was being born at Niagara Falls, but the ER was closed that day. The doctor smashed a window to get in, performed a C-section without anesthesia, and they finally got her to Mac. By the time she got to Mac, the child's brain damaged. But when she just had a C-section, but because of the way the billing works, she was not a patient at Mac, so she had a waiting room. And that was 19 years ago. If you haven't met the crisis in healthcare yet, it's there. But we have a healthcare system that will abort, will euthanize, will do sex changes. See, this can't continue. And what you sow, you reap. If you want more of what you got, you invest more in it. We're investing more and more into chaos. So we're going to be the ones, Christians, your grandkids, your great-grandkids, your ultra great-great-grandkids are going to be the ones who are going to rebuild society. It'll happen. If it doesn't happen here, it'll happen in China. It'll happen in North Korea. No country can turn its back on God for that long. So what do you want to do now? Okay, last thing. Kind of the last thing. Okay, what can I do now? Number 4, do not expect schools to turn around in your lifetime, your children's lifetime, or your grandchildren's lifetime. We're not against education, but just don't let school interfere with education. Education and schools are not identical, not the same thing. Our current battles have only just begun. There's no reason to think this will go away easily. Even if all the LGBTQ+++ things, we still have an education system that does not acknowledge the lordship of Christ. And I don't mean let's just talk about God, say yes, God's in school. It's Christ. Because there's no God accessible outside of Christ. The banner of Christ must fly over the schools, not just a general, generic God. Because that means Islam is okay, Mormonism is okay, all kinds of things are okay. No. The schools, your children, who do they belong to? They belong to Christ. They do not belong to the school system. And then home educate them, okay? So I've already said that. Come out of your retirement if you can. Provide for your children and grandchildren. And if you need, we have we're overflowing in this church with people who do homeschooling. There's all kinds of curriculum out there. I mean, all the way from a spiral-bound thing that every grade 6 kid should know to advanced stuff on DVDs and everything else. And, it's not, there's no excuses anymore. We homeschooled our youngest and we kind of scrambled a bit to find material. Now there's more material than we can possibly come up with. Now, but in the meantime, everybody wants to do something, so I'm going to give you a job to do. Okay? I printed off like one of these, but we can email these because Heather has your email addresses. This is a little letter. See, I believe we should make life very irritating for the people who want to destroy our children. Okay, now I mean really, if somebody started to physically molest your child, you'd be okay with a baseball bat or something even harder. But I think what we should be doing, what I have an idea here is now we've got this rainbow flag thing, and it's inclusion trans flag. Next year will be a different flag. Invest in flag makers if you want to make some money. I mean, there's a new flag every. I never did mean that. Okay, but you know, a flag is an ideology, right? It means that the ownership is there. When the king's flag is over Buckingham Palace, he's home. He's the king. When an explorer, you see Christopher Columbus landing in the Caribbean, what's he first thing he does? Plants a flag. I don't want to get any conspiracy people up here, but when they landed on the moon, they put a flag. Or when they didn't land on the moon, they had a picture of a guy putting it. Just pick your column A or column B. But you understand, what's the flag mean? We conquered this. We own this. So it's over to kids' school. We own what goes on in here. We are in control, okay? So it is not, see, this is humanism language. Don't accept it. Oh, it's for empathy, inclusion, and tolerance. No, it's lordship over the school and over the kids in school, and give it a few years, over all of society. That's where we're at right now. I'm kind of just paraphrasing. I think some of you have these in front of you. The reason is that I said that example here, an adult in the neighborhood wants to talk privately with their children about the sexual behavior. We'd be upset about that, but presenting inappropriate. I was a trainer for Plan to Protect for child abuse prevention. I let my certificate lapse. I think I'm so qualified. But presenting inappropriate sexual materials to children is a form of sexual abuse. It is. And this is done in school. But because this is being done in school and not in the basement of a neighborhood creep and being done by credentialed and unionized professionals, we meekly accept it. Well, no more. We don't do that. Okay, so question is this legal, what I'm proposing here? What are we going to do? This is about as soft a protest as you can get. You don't even have to leave home. You don't have to make a sign. You don't have to be, filmed by media. So protest, number one here on the page, legality, protest is legal, harassment is not. Therefore, the following rules must be kept in mind. Contact each school one time only. I would suggest we get that. Tomorrow's a PA day, but if we had a list of schools, pick a school, and if all of us called the same school, that would be more significant. You can call all schools every day if you want to, but what if they got like 20 or 30 or 1,000 calls at one school? That's what I'm kind of envisioning here. Call. If you get a phone, and if you phone and get a voicemail, just leave a message, and then you're done with that school for that day. If you speak to someone, say something along the lines of this script. I even made this easy for you. Repeat calls from the same number can be construed as harassment, so don't keep calling back. That's not. That can get you in trouble. The key is hundreds of calls from hundreds of different people all on the same day to one chosen school. Do not identify yourself as being from Action for Canada, okay? Or Heather's friend. Do not say, hi, I'm from the Mountain View Christian Church, okay? We want to get, now that's a couple of reasons. We don't want to get harassed back, doxxed, or anything else. However, we also want them to know that it's not an organization. We want it to seem like everybody's calling. And we're just random people who just hate the flag being flown, not that we've actually organized it. So the secret is to be organized but not come off as organized, which I don't come off as organized very often. I'm an expert in not being organized. Do not identify yourself. So we want to give the impression there are a lot of angry parents, grandparents, and taxpayers who have had enough. If we say we are from a specific organization, it can be easily dismissed. Set your phones to private. Your grandkids could probably show you how to do that if you don't know how. Every phone's different, and so you never can't be traced, okay? Do not use a fax. It is illegal to send a fax without a callback number, which we still get faxes. You on a cruise. Not fun. So the plan is Thursday, June 1st and Friday, June 2nd. Everybody report pride flags to the coordinator. We need a coordinator. We don't have one yet, so it's Heather. And then on the weekend, we can make a list of schools that we're going to approach, okay? The chosen schools should appear random with no discernible pattern. So if you do Ridgemont on Monday or tomorrow, whichever, and then the next one do one in Waterdown or one in Ancaster, just random, but they should all be the same school for everyone. And a list can be sent to everyone who is participating in the Hamilton chapter. And be polite. The person you're talking to may agree with you. Right? So be polite. If they hang up on you, they probably don't. So I have a solution here, a script, partway down the back page of this, and it says this: Good morning, afternoon. You can figure that out yourself. I wish to register my complaint with the display of a rainbow trans inclusion flag at your school. Your school. I didn't even write this correctly. This flag is overtly political and ideological. It does not reflect the values and priorities of families in our community. Flags indicate ownership of the property beneath, and the LGBTQ community does not own our children. Please remove it immediately. Now, you're all bright people. You can say something else. Don't swear. Okay. And so if you're asked for a name, you can say, my child or grandchild attends the school, and I'm afraid of retribution if they are identified. I am a concerned taxpayer who feels this flag is inappropriate. And retribution, retaliation may actually come to a child. But when you're talking to a school secretary, they are the ones who are going to know which teachers are the problems. And if you call and say, I'm afraid my child will be retaliated against in the school, they could put something together there and say, okay, we got to watch this teacher because you have some, church secretaries too, but school secretaries run everything, as far as I could tell. I remember as a kid, anything going wrong, the secretary knew exactly what was wrong, right? So is this an idea? Let Heather know if you're going to be doing this, okay? That's not even the right page. Okay, and so I'm going to just end that and ask for questions. Yes?
I have a question for you. Pride flag, it's multi-colors. Colors were stolen by Jesus, or I should say they were stolen by God.
I'm sorry, what?
The colors that the pride flag
Yeah.
is on, they stole it from the colors from God.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But no one in the education system or whatever wants to hear about it.
Well, they're not acknowledging that God created everything, including color. They're not going to acknowledge that. That'd be creation, right?
What they're actually doing, though, is God put the rainbow in the sky.
Yeah.
So that, as a sign that He would not destroy the world because of sin. And basically, they're waving that sign, that flag, and going, "You can't destroy us." You can't send blood or
Yeah. It's sort of a dare.
mocking.
If you're into internet research, do a thing called Ngram. Ngram. It's a Google thing. Ngram. You can type in 3 words separated by commas or phrases, and it will tell you in English when those words started being used and the frequency. Okay, so when you look up the word forsooth, nobody uses that word anymore. So it'll show maybe large. It goes back to around year 1400. Okay, maybe they did say that. Then it goes down. Look at the word homosexual. 1930s, 40s, modern psychology. That's what started. The word homosexual. What was the word before that?
Queer.
What's that?
Queer.
Queer? Not even before that, though. Yeah? Sodomite. Ooh, that sounds nasty. But they were called sodomites. Why? for we know why. Okay? That was the sin of sodomy. But we've all kind of just stepped back and said, okay, yes, you can use that word. But what if we started using the right words? I mean, they're all about using the right words for body parts, right? Even before the kid knows anything, they wanted to make sure everyone used the right word. What if we use the right words? Well, that's kind of tough. But see how easily we've kind of just slid just a little bit off. Yeah, Ngram's a really fun internet thing. You can find out what words are being used and when, you know, things have come up. And it's only English, and it's only what Google knows. But Google has an awful lot of books under its belt. Any other questions? Yeah, great.
I was talking with Hamilton District Christian School today.
Oh, yeah. Meant
Um,
to mention that.
One of the board members, and they had a major battle last year over this nonsense, and they managed to elect 3 people to the board, to a board of 5, and they've made it very clear to the school that they will not be partaking in this.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at sending Matt there next year. We've homeschooled him his whole life, but at this point we feel it would be good.
Mm-hmm.
And so I made it very clear to them that if any of this, if they flew a flag, we would be pulling our child, Matt out, and we would be looking for a full refund.
Mm-hmm.
And our friend, who's the head, said if they do that, I will burn the school down. Like, so, but there is a big battle there, and it's my understanding is like 51 to 52% to 40, yeah, so 51 to 40 now. That is how close a Christian school is in division.
Mm-hmm.
And another point would be Redeemer.
Yes, I've been in contact with the vice president's been writing to me. Yeah.
Redeemer has gay flags in their school.
Mm-hmm.
They are claiming that they are in residence, but we know that one of them is not.
It's in the window of an administration building because I wrote a letter, and the issue, and I think what he said is almost exactly what you sent me about HD, is we want to understand people and be welcoming but what the whole tenor of the issue is, we want to this person's in what God calls an abomination, in gross sin, and we're just going to leave you there. We're not going to do anything. We're not going to provide you any escape because that's your identity. And if that's an identity, then that's really a serious problem. I mean, everybody sins, and some people sin in ways we would consider much worse than others. But to just say, that's my identity, that's where you have actually rejected redemption and any serious dealing with sin. So that's, yeah. I'm anxious to see how that goes for you guys. Yeah.
I called Redeemer College 3 days ago, I guess it was, and they, I said, it's come to my attention that you guys are fucking flag. And she said, do you mean like the ones that are in the windows? And I said, well, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You're presenting the flag.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know
How that comports, yeah.
The mandate, and I got the mandate written
Yeah.
right in front of me. She said, oh, well, they've been taken down. They were taken down 2 weeks ago. And I said, can I ask why? And she said, because we
Okay, well, yay! Okay. I should go to Walmart, see if they took down that display.
I want this document, I want this photocall document.
Yeah.
Because I am a concerned parent.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
should I even consider sending my son here? I certainly will not.
Mm-hmm.
Should you continue with flags? I want this document.
And there's a whole nother thing that we need to talk about another night, is where you send your kids to be educated after high school. There's a movement of Christians who are starting to look at doing, basically we've done homeschool, and now they're doing home university. Small groups in churches. The internet has made things so possible where a lecturer from one part of the world can speak to others. And so there's a big movement to just sort of chuck the whole university system, because I didn't even talk about that tonight, but it's completely owned. right? And it's hard for, like, Redeemer to stay in the good graces of the government that allows them to be called a university. Then what happens if they don't have, if they say, well, there's, I don't feel included here, right? My alma mater, Lincoln Christian Seminary in Lincoln, Illinois, it's a town no one's heard of. Heard of Lincoln, but not Lincoln, Illinois. And they're being sued by a student who was either transgender or openly gay because they expelled him. Or her, or it. They expelled them. Because they're being sued. And it happened like 40 years ago when I was a student there too. They would, okay, you're out. And I'm really proud of them because a lot of schools are kind of capitulating to that, right? And how is this person going to become a leader in the church? Right? That's the question. We're building the church by building leaders. Well, how's that going to happen? How does that work out? Right?
Don't they sign something saying that they agree with the creed or something?
What's that?
When they go to, say, Redeemer,
Yeah.
don't they sign something saying that they agree with their creed?
I would think so. But they had a suicide last year in the counselor's office by a transgendered student, which I consider that really a suicide bombing. I mean, that was like, a person was really disturbed. But again, why was there an LGBTQ social club in the school? Why if that's your identity, right? Okay, a student says, well, my identity is Grand Theft Auto for real. I want to steal cars. That's my identity. That's what I am, who I am. They'd say, no, you're not going to be here. It would be that for any kind of sin, right? But we privileged that. Or sleeping around is probably more likely an issue. But, yeah. Sure.
I was going to say, one way they play on children's emotions in the school is
Oh, yeah.
to say, just be kind. And you've seen that written on T-shirts, on backpacks. And
Pink shirt day.
Just be kind.
Wear that pink shirt or
It
else.
doesn't mean what you think it means.
No.
Of course you want your children to be kind.
Yeah.
You don't want them pointing out differences in other people.
Mm-mm.
But it's not what it means.
No. It's conform.
It is.
It's conform, yes. Like anti-bullying campaigns. Monarchism in school, zero tolerance for school for bullying. Well, yeah, right. No. Institutional bullying.
Robert Kiyosaki, I don't know if anybody's heard of him, but Rich Dad Poor Dad,
Mm.
author. He's outright said universities are not necessary with all the information that's on YouTube.
No.
And I would say, I have a university degree, but I have a successful business, and I don't think it was the degree that did it. I could have done it without the degree.
Yeah.
So.
But we're in a very certified culture, so there's so many jobs you'd never get. So you could be a mother to multiple children and do it very successfully, but you could not work in a child care center without a 2-year diploma that says something. And that's part of the certification culture. I mean, I do want a cardiologist to have a certificate somewhere. Right? Maybe.
But not when he's stupid.
But not when he's just stupid.
When you go in
Yeah.
and see them and they're like,
Yeah.
oh, COVID's real.
Yeah.
And you need to take the jab because it works.
That won't fix.
I don't need that
Yeah.
kind of doctor.
Yeah, and your certificates can't fix stupid. That's for sure. Yeah.
I listened to a guy talking today, and he said that the whole LGBTQ agenda is to make fun of God
Mm-hmm.
because God either made a mistake by putting you in the wrong body,
Mm-hmm.
or he's playing a cruel joke on you.
Mm-hmm.
So you're separating people from God.
Yep.
And your parents are on God's side.
Mm-hmm.
So we're the ones that are going
Yes.
to love you and take care of you.
Well, do you hear the word co-parenting come up? Yeah, right? Yeah.
But it separates
Oh, yeah.
kids from God,
Mhm.
but kids from their parents as
Mhm.
well.
It goes all the way back to the garden because Satan is a murderer. Satan is anti-life. Satan wants to destroy the life God has created. So what better way to do it than the LGBTQ movement, because they will not naturally have children, right? That's one, besides abortion and euthanasia and other things like that. It's always what's against life is the thing you want to watch for. Yeah.
They started in kindergarten, actually. They sit in a circle and they go around and have each child say, what do your parents call your private part? Doesn't matter what the kid says, you laugh, cause you wanna make parents look stupid, they don't know anything, we're the only ones that know something, we will teach you the truth.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I've come a long ways. So, okay. So anyway, is there, if no one, you want to just end all this? I'll just shut this. I'll shut the recording down.
Yeah, please do.
And by the way, when this goes online, it will. I mean, as it goes out as a recording, I can't cancel this. What I want to tell you is the question and answers in the comments will not be on it. It'll be edited off.
Oh, this part of it?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't.
It doesn't record very well.
No, it doesn't.
Right. So,
Okay.
hey, there I am. Okay. All right. Goodbye, everybody.
That was excellent. Thank you.